Welcome in, everyone, to the Crowded Booth here on a Monday or a Sunday night. Ralph, we're not live on YouTube. There we go. Now we're live on YouTube. It just went live on YouTube. Welcome in. Sorry for the delay. My name is Bryce Coon. Welcome into the Crowded Booth. This is obviously Swarm Talk, talking a little Georgia Tech football here on a Sunday evening. A busy weekend for the Jackets. We're going to talk a couple of things. Some portal entries that maybe you didn't know happened, but did happen. Three guys that they added to the mix, and then a potential target on the offensive line. Will the Jackets want to bolster even more? We'll see here in a second. Ralph Leary behind the camera and behind the sticks. My name is Bryce Coon. Welcome to Swarm Talk. We'll see you here in just a second.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Coon.
All right, welcome in. My name is Bryce Coon alongside Ralph Leary in the background. Clayton said the earliest Bryce has ever started. Look at us and look at God. We're out here vibing for our fellow people of the world. Hey, before we get started, going totally off script. I tend to do that from time to time. Check out Section 103. They're one of the best hats on the market in terms of Georgia Tech fan gear. Make sure you use code CrowdedBooth for 10% off your order today. Great hats. Also some really good stuff. I'm going off script here because there's a lot of people that hate. Georgia Tech. And there's a man that lives in Thomasville, Georgia. And, you know, he was at one point convinced that Ralph Leary was going to be on staff. And this is what I want you to do here tonight. Because I'm not into pranks. I am a little bit. I want you to Google Jackson Gordy, Thomasville, Georgia. See what you can find. Can you find an email address? Can you find a post box? I don't know. See what you can find. I don't know why we're talking about this. See what you can find, though. Let them know how you feel. All right, my name is Bryce Coon. We're talking a little Georgia Tech football here tonight. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're talking a couple of different things. Now, first off, the portal has officially closed as of Friday at midnight. What does that mean in the overarching scheme of things? Let's talk about that here for a second. What does that mean? It means that the paperwork to be filed had to be filed by Georgia Techs and colleges across the country, had to be filed by midnight to the portal, to compliance, all these different those things. And that's big time. Found on LinkedIn. There we go. That's what you need, Clayton. So Ralph saying, please do not look that name up. We are deleting that comment. We want him there. The commercial banker at Synovus. Yes, that's him. Look at what the community can do. Look at what the community can do. Okay, so what I was saying is the portal closed on Friday. You have 72 hours if you're the school to release the names who are entering the portal. Okay, so from the time it's the paperwork is officially filed, and you've seen a lot of these, like the screenshots that the kids make, and Nico, what's up, my friend? We're gonna talk Shedeur Sanders tomorrow night live on the show, but tonight we're talking Tech in the portal. So, all things considered here, you're going to see potentially some more names, and not specifically with Georgia Tech, but you're going to see some names kind of trickle in over the next, I guess we could say, you have Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Maybe some names fall in. Now, that doesn't mean they've entered the portal past the deadline, just the paperwork. The kid has 3 days to announce it, or the school has 3 days to release the name into essentially what there is, portal database. Lots of different publications have access to this. So like we see, when a kid enters the portal, his name's right here. So there's that. Let's talk about buttered sausage. God, that's amazing. So anyways, lock it in, like the video, subscribe to the channel. It's going to be interesting. Nancy says, why don't players go ahead and announce it? I don't know, Nancy. I think it's a personal preference thing, to be honest with you. You have 72 hours. So if the kid wants to announce it with a graphic, he can. If he wants to announce it in his notes section of his phone, he can. Where the school also kind of puts it out there as well. So it's interesting. Okay, so let's talk about this. Some portal entries that maybe you didn't really, maybe you missed over the weekend, maybe you weren't paying attention. That's fine. We got you covered right here. First up, Ralph, let's put that first banner up. Portal entries that maybe you didn't know. One, Nakari Ashley, a guy that was really seen as a hybrid player in high school, linebacker, tight end type, has entered the transfer portal, battled some injuries during his time in Atlanta, and just really could never get through the injury. He's going to go elsewhere and play. And I liked this pickup when they made it. I thought this was a guy that, very athletic, kind of fit the mold of what you want at the linebacker position, and even kind of as an edge rusher type player. Just didn't work out. He's going to go, move there to everyone. So, Nakari Ash in the portal. Trey Horn, another name that entered the portal actually on April the 22nd, 23rd. His name went into the transfer portal. So that's something that's kind of, you take a look at and you say, okay, another attrition there. Two names right there. And then obviously, you just have seen, I guess you could say, we talked about the potential rumors of who could go in, who could be an option. When Georgia Tech brought in some of the defensive backs, I told you, hey, you might be seeing, some names enter. Cedric Franklin II also entered the portal. So there you go. That is what it is. Gavin says Eric Singleton is a portal entry. That is definitely true. TD Jake says, I already know everyone who's entered so far because of KQ. There you go. So anyways, those three names we kind of saw into the portal. Out of those three, Pritchett probably has some of the best upside, but with the crowded room in the defensive back room, he's going to have 4 years of eligibility to go do something somewhere else. You wish him the best of luck. Just didn't work out here. So those are the portal entries. Now, let's talk about who was added to the fray. And then we're going to get into a guy that I'm hearing that we could see maybe some renewed interest in the transfer portal. Let's start with player number one. So, player number one, who is Akilo Stone? And Ralph wanted to put again, and I don't blame him because this is the second arrival of Akilo Stone to Georgia Tech. This, to me, is an addition that, and I'll just say this right here, I think Georgia Tech. Now we talked about this in the show last time. We didn't really know, what was the situation in terms of him leaving. Was there bad blood? I don't know. Brent Key was the only guy that was truly on staff during that time, so you can kind of understand he left right after Collins was fired. Didn't know what the situation was going to be, and opts to go to Ole Miss and was I would say, and Ralph, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, was a rotational defensive lineman for them. Offered some stability up front in the middle for them. I think this is good. In terms of that. Gavin does ask, is this an Anthony Edwards podcast? Yeah, he's taken LeBum to the cleaners. So yes, it is. So Akilo Stone again is going to make his way back to Atlanta. Here's kind of my thoughts on this in terms of this. And I'll say this too. This is a guy that I believe, and I know Georgia Tech benefited from the non-inter-SEC transfer rule here, because this was a guy that could have gone to another SEC program if that rule wasn't there. And I'm not saying maybe he wanted to go to Georgia Tech all alone, okay? But Stone was thought about, was coveted in terms of where he could go after his time at Ole Miss. I can just go ahead and tell you, a team that I'm pretty familiar with would have loved to kick the tires in that situation had it been legal for them to go get them. But the inter-SEC rule doesn't allow that. Akilo Stone can really only go, and in terms of what he did, and Dr. Bob says this as well, PFF numbers were much better at Ole Miss. He had the numbers. He'd go play in the Big Ten, the ACC. You probably weren't going to see him drop down in terms of the group of five level. But with those two, he maybe even a Big 12 school, but he goes back, somewhere we can call it home. Georgia Tech fans get to see him again. Why is this a big pickup, though? Well, Ralph did some of the heavy lifting on tonight's show, so I'm going to tell you, in 7 games last year, he had 14 tackles, 1.5 sacks, and a pass deflection. We talked about here departed, from after 2022, typically really where you kind of go back to that when he departed. This is a guy who left Georgia Tech after the spring and was named like one of the spring standouts. Like, he was poised for a big year in 2023. He opts to leave, joins Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, and I would say that he, did what you wanted to do in terms of a guy in portal. He upped his stock and he upped his ante. He got film against really good teams. I got the chance to see him up close twice in the past 2 seasons. And I can tell you this, a couple things. He is disruptive up front. Yes, Ole Miss had a better defensive line, last year in the past 2 years than Georgia Tech will employ in 2025. But against SEC competition, against offensive lines, and like I'll tell you this, and we'll talk about another guy here in a little bit that had to go up against some guys from the LSU games that I got to sit there and watch him play against. Stone was a guy who held his own and made some nice plays and created some havoc against an LSU offensive line that has now seen every single member of that offensive line on an NFL roster after this weekend and get drafted. So to me, this is a big pickup in terms of leadership and a plug and play type of player. And, there's a lot of different options you can go with. We're going to get into specific positional previews leaving the spring, entering the summer here in the next week. But I do think that this is a great pickup in terms of, who he is. He's been here before. He went off. He did a good job at Ole Miss. He comes back for his last season. He's going to spend his last season in Atlanta. And I think it's the definition of when they set out this plan of who they wanted and what type of player they wanted. Stone checks off every single box. Like, has produced, and the biggest one, has produced against good competition. For Georgia Tech and this defensive line, I don't think that you could have afforded to really add somebody that hadn't shown they could produce against good competition, because it's not a dig here. I will say this. You have a lot of those guys. You have guys that are just young. Why not mold the young guys and go get somebody who's plug and play? And Dr. Bob brings this up here, Ralph, and you can throw that latest comment there that he talks about. Stone could be listed as a starter very well and rotate with Vandenberg and then obviously Alexander in the middle. So you will talk more about the defensive line here in the weeks to come, but I think that this gives you a trio, or at least 2 or 3, of guys that you like, okay, they're veterans. They've been in the game before. They understand what they're doing. We can utilize those 3 and develop younger guys. This bridges the gap of not having to put a lot on a guy who hasn't played a ton and put a lot on his shoulders. Because remember, Zeke Biggers just got picked up in the draft. Horace Lockett would have filled that role. He opts to go to the portal. So you needed someone with game experience that you could count on while you develop some of the younger guys. And I think that just strengthens the length of this program. I think it strengthens the length of that room. And it's interesting to kind of see, obviously, what Jess Simpson does. And look, Simpson is a guy, too. I think we all can agree, pretty good defensive line coach. Got a lot out of a little last year. Going to have to probably do a little bit of that again as they build that room up. Stone's a guy that kind of helps maybe ease a little of that burden this summer and fall. So I love this pickup. It's great. He's performed against really good competition, and you move on from there. You get a familiar face, Kilo Stone. That's a big addition and kind of what I was talking about. Player number 2 that we're rolling with here on a Sunday night, I should say. I haven't done a Sunday night show in a long time, probably since the season. Who is Jaron Gilmore? Well, Mr. Gilmore is a guy who is, when we talk about the portal, this is the definition of why we like the portal, right? And I think we can all agree here. When you see a guy like Gilmore, maybe under-recruited, under-evaluated, just maybe wasn't good enough at that time to play FBS football, goes to Tennessee Tech, spends several years there, transfers to Georgia State for last season, has a really good year, 54 tackles, 2 interceptions, and a pass deflection in the Sun Belt, and works his way up the ladder as a transfer, and now he's going to be playing Power 4 ACC football. And I think what you get in a guy in Gilmore is you get a guy who is a veteran play experience. And I mentioned, I guess it was last Thursday we were live. Probably not, because Thursday was the draft. Maybe Wednesday or Tuesday. I don't remember. Tuesday, Ralph? Was it Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday? So when we talked about this, I didn't necessarily think they would add more to the secondary, but they do. And this is not a bad issue to have. We talked about what they brought in. Savion Riley is going to play safety. Gilmore's a guy that can be kind of a Swiss Army knife for you, but it just adds experience to a group that is very, very deep and very talented. Georgia Tech secondary is going to be a position group that I am very interested to watch in 2025, because you have veterans that need to take a step up into leadership roles, but you've got some freshmen and some young guys that are really, really talented that could push them. And so maybe this is where they really want this room. And, you add in a guy like Gilmore who's played some football. I like the portal because of this. He's got some, really good snap count. This is, at the very least, in my opinion, a depth piece in case you get to a point where they get into fall camp maybe one of the young guys, you're like, hey, he needs more develop, more seasoning, and really, in terms of practice. We can't throw him out there in an ACC conference game and feel necessarily great about it. Gilmore can hopefully be that bridge behind the starting, line of guys. Gilmore's a good player, seasoned vet. I like him there as well. So they add Gilmore. They obviously had Kilo Stone. And then an option where, man, I got to watch this guy again. We go player number 3 that they've added in the portal. They go get an offensive lineman. And we talked about this last week. Malachi Carney out of South Alabama. This is a guy who was originally, just a player that I think had played a little bit of left tackle and right tackle, played, I believe, every single game last year, all 13 games at the right tackle spot this past season. A couple stats here for you. Against when I saw him play against LSU, I think a lot of you have seen the clip of him. The run blocking grade was a 63.4, which is pretty good. Pass blocking was a 46.7. He did have 2 penalties on all the snaps that were at right tackle and then allowed 2 quarterback pressures. Let's also take that out. You're playing on a team where you have a young quarterback who's going to be in the ACC, by the way, this past season. But you're playing on a team. Ralph, we were at that game, right? Was that the game you were at? Yeah. So, Ralph knows a lot of us about kind of South Alabama too. You had a quarterback who was relatively young in his playing career, a guy who would like to scramble a little bit too. And, just maybe that internal clock wasn't necessarily great. So you had to block for a little bit longer. Also, with what you were facing on the other side in that LSU game, Braden Swinson and Savion Jones both just heard their name called in the first 5-6 rounds of the NFL draft. So you're playing NFL type of players. And so I'm not paying too much attention to the pass blocking in that. I'm not paying a ton of attention to the look, PFF is not the Bible. It's a tool to use, but it's not the end all be all. So I do think that Malachi Carney fits a need on this team and very well may be your starting right tackle when you open up on the road at Colorado next year. What it does, though, is, and I mentioned this, and I forgot to mention this with the portal entries. It's kind of out there at this point. Jacoby Jones, the JUCO guy they brought in, just didn't pan out this spring. He's headed back to junior college. So you don't have that there. You've got potentially some young guys, but I think this is another spot where you really go and say, you know what? We've got a chance to go win something this year. Let's just cover our bases. We like the young talent we have, and G Blade's done a good job developing some of these guys, but why not add an insurance policy? And I can't remember the exact size of Malachi Carney, but I know he's over 300 pounds. I believe he's around, I'll tell you here in a second, 6'4", 315, 312, around that arc. So, you have a guy that has played football, played some snaps. I like this addition. You go back and watch the game, went back and watched the game against, LSU, likes to get downhill in the run game, probably needs some help and some development at the pass blocking spot. But with what Georgia Tech likes to do, what they want to be known to do, this guy feels like he could be a road grader for you. You get behind him, you run off his butt playing right tackle. Jamal Haynes, Trillium Maddox, anybody you want to throw out there in that group, you have obviously a guy that you like can get that done. And so once again, another bridging the gap move for Georgia Tech here, and I like it. I think they did a good job with all 3 of these pickups. I think they did a great job with all 3 of these pickups because it really does give you an opportunity to kind of sit there and say, okay, we have young talent we like at those spots, but let's cover our bases and let's make sure we're doing this and that and our T's are crossed and our I's, are dotted so that we can make sure that depth is real to where if we have to go to those young guys, we can allow them to have some seasoning in summer and fall where they don't have to be thrust into something they're not. I think that's probably the transformation of this roster has taken the biggest step is the depth has gotten to a point really certainly at some spots, but these moves showcase at spots where you don't feel like you have to necessarily have to have these guys play when they first arrive on campus. If they do, then you want it to be a product of how good they are, you want it to be a product of development, not need. I'll say that again. I think Georgia Tech's roster construction has gotten to a spot where if the young guys are going to play, it's because they've proved it. You don't have to have it, if that makes sense. They've played so well that you can't ignore it, not the fact that that position's so bad you have to go get them to play right now. and that's something really big. So really interesting kind of stuff there too. So Ralph says might be. I didn't see that. So yeah, it's to me. I mean, yeah, you look if Riggs is starting at right tackles because he's beating out Carney. Agreed wholeheartedly. So we kind of talk about Jacoby Jones goes in the portal. Who's Malachi Carney? Love that addition. Let's get to and maybe this is out there. I don't, you know what I mean? I don't know. We don't peruse things to see if certain information's out there or not. But you know, it is what it is. Who here? Before we get to that, it's my show. I can take this however long I want to go. Who here has ever joined an athletic club? And why does that sound like something out of Seinfeld? Getting ready to join one. Got the business card right here. Hashtag not an ad, but yeah. So there's that. So yeah, Kilo Stone 4-star recruit on 24/7. Good stuff right here, there as well. Okay, let's talk about this last one, and we'll get you out of here. Enjoy the rest of your night on a Sunday evening. Atlanta Athletic Club represent. No, this is what are the perks? Well, I gotta ask that. The perks, got a splash pad, pool for the baby. It is what it is. So I love that aspect of it. And got a gym. You get different classes as well in the gym. So am I going to play some rugby? Probably not. Most likely not. But getting ready to join that athletic club this week. Good deal too. Okay. Nate says joined late to the live stream, but overall it seems we are net positive in the portal this year. We'll see. You know, Nate, I think in terms of on paper, I'm just going to keep saying this. And God, we're going to talk about this so much when we get to the wide receiver position preview. This is my official stance on the Eric Singleton move. This is what 5 months later now. It's April. That move happened in December or whatever. Eric Singleton is a very, very good football player. Like very, very good football player. If you're denying that as a fan, that's fine. It's not true. You're in denial, but that's fine. I'll let you do that. Within what Georgia Tech's mental philosophy is as a team, is he as valuable to what they want there? Maybe he isn't. Maybe they don't value that as much as an Auburn or someone else does. So all that to say, it could be a net positive. Sure, it could be. But we'll see. So I don't know, Nate. I do think that they brought in some really good talent, some underrated talent. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I don't salivate often. Go ahead and clip that for me right here. I don't salivate often. But what I will tell you, if the linebacker room starts who I think they're going to start, buddy, this is going to be one of the best linebacking rooms that Georgia Tech has had in a long time. A long time. So that's it has nothing to do with the portal. I just wanted to say that. Jonesy says, sorry, late working on getting the wood up in the crowded booth bar. Pause. So evening all. Coffee Killer just got to sit down and chill. Just got to join, sit down and chill. Welcome in. Welcome in. Happy Sunday. Christian says Colorado has a super stud freshman quarterback. I watched him play several times, and he's unbelievably talented. Colorado's well coached. We can't overlook them at all. No, you can't. We're going to talk more about the schedule here in a little bit in future shows. But does he start? Is Caden Salter the starting quarterback? That's also something that is interesting to kind of monitor there. Someone's going to get the clip out of that. There you go, right there. There you go. 2 times, Matt. 2 opportunities. All right, let's get to the final topic of tonight's show. There is a name that we talked about in the winter, and this could be interesting. Is there a new offensive line target emerging? A lot of people thought with Carney in the fold, you might not need anything else because you liked where you were. But like we just talked about, I think in today's day and age, there's several things you have to do as a head coach. You cannot coach in fear of the transfer portal in terms of guys leaving. It's your job to win games. This is a business. Relationships matter. Do not get me wrong. But this is a business. This is what this is now. And it's not just a business under the table. This is a business in every aspect of what it is. So you can't coach in fear of the transfer portal. You need to be able to just add talent whenever you need to, as long as it doesn't disrupt the chemistry. Now, that's up to the evaluation of the coaches, too. So it's not like it's just they can willy-nilly, free willy, pause, whatever they want to do. but they need to be able to make additions when deemed necessary. So is there a new offensive line target emerging? And this is kind of where I'll take this. Looking at the portal database, I guess we'll say, there's a familiar name that Georgia Tech was linked to earlier in the process. William Reed, the former Princeton tackle, was released from his agreement. I mean, there's no such thing as an NLI now, so I guess it's just a NIL agreement. I don't know what it is. But leaving West Virginia, obviously for folks that if you don't pay attention to college football outside of Georgia Tech, Rich Rod leaves Jacksonville State, heads back to Morgantown after Ralph's beloved Neil Brown was let go, and going to bring some more Jacksonville State guys with him after the spring portal. Rumors are there's a potentially, other options that go with up there. So it does beg the question: would Reed be an option for them? Is Reed a guy that they could look at and say, "Hey, this is a guy we really kind of fell in love with the first time around, and now that he's available, and we didn't know he was going to be available, could Georgia Tech be linked to them?" Now, nothing from the Georgia Tech side of things could necessarily tell you that, but I should not tell you that. There's nothing to indicate that right now. It just popped up in the feed, and it could be interesting to see kind of what happens there. So is William Reed a target worth looking at right now for Georgia Tech there too? So it's going to be interesting. Christian does ask, when does the portal close? The portal closed on Friday, and we did talk about this earlier. You have 72 hours till it has to be public. So tomorrow, that's when you're not going to see names pop up unless a coach is fired. Then you have, or let go, or coaches leave. You have 30 days when the portal opens. You shouldn't be seeing names Tuesday, Wednesday, or I should say Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But God knows who at this point. I mean, you could just sue and get out of it. So all that to say is that's what you could see. I like the additions that Georgia Tech made this past weekend or this past week. I really do. I think that they've made some good value decisions. This new offensive line targeting William Reed, if that's something they want to go to, you could very well understand why. They really liked him the first time around. Academically, you know that he's going to be fine to get into Georgia Tech. Spent, Ralph, was it 4 full years at Princeton? I mean, Ivy League guy, so you know what he able to do there too. So we'll see what happens with that. Obviously, not a ton of traction there, just something to monitor. Would they fall back in love and want to add even more to their offensive line spot? But we'll see kind of what happens. Hey, make sure you tune in tomorrow night, talking kind of a college football NFL pseudo episode. Thanks for everyone that tuned in last Thursday night to the draft episode. Tomorrow night, we're going to be talking kind of the Shedeur Sanders stuff. Colorado. What really is Colorado at this point without those guys? Maybe looking more into that and just the whole situation as a whole. I want to talk a little bit about that. We really don't talk a lot about the NFL, but I think this is a story worth kind of mentioning there as well. And then obviously some shows coming on later and later into the weeks to come. So make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Continue to get those numbers climbing. We appreciate you. And we'll catch you next time. My name is Bryce Kuhn, Ralph Leary in the background. Swarm Talk, all things Georgia Tech here in the Crowded Booth, and we will see you next time.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Kuhn.